Good morning. I'm Frank Kaufmann. I'm the president of the Settlement Project. Today is January 20th, 2021. We watched the President of the United States offer his final remarks at 8:30 in the morning at Andrews Joint Air Force Base, accompanied by his wife Melania and his family. And the very few number of people who could attend, there were several hundred there, due to various constraints on gatherings, so-called COVID and so-called security concerns. So several hundred people came to join Andrews Air Force Base to bid the president farewell and to thank him and his family for their years of service. And then the media attention shifts to the inauguration ceremonies dedicated to the incoming administration. I guess it began with a trip to a church, followed by what perhaps is probably finished now, the inauguration ceremony. I'll watch it later, and if I have any thoughts about that event, maybe I'll comment again. But what I primarily want to speak about now is what I believe, or just to offer personal opinion, on what the MAGA community should start to do with ourselves. It was a great disappointment on many fronts. A great many of the 75 plus million voters who voted for President Trump do not have confidence that the election was fairly won by the incoming president and vice president. That leaves a scar. The unfortunate events of January 6th created an opportunity for critics of, I'm going to call these MAGA, the MAGA community, Make America Great Again. What I define as the MAGA community are people who are committed to the basic foundational elements that make America great: its Constitution and especially its Bill of Rights, its God-given guarantees of individual freedoms, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom of speech. So I am going to define in my own mind, or perhaps for our community and our listeners, something that I will define, that I will call the MAGA community, Make America Great Again. This was a slogan developed by President Trump prior to his election. It was part of his 2016 campaign effort, and it became to be one of the elements of identification. President Trump was an extremely commanding personality, and from the beginning of his entry onto the political scene, he became the center of all commentary. It was an extremely unusual period in which everything was just focused on him alone. I'd love to see a study of the column inches, the so-called barrels of ink, and the hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of news media attention that was given just to himself as a person. I think that globally, I travel. I've spent lots of time in Europe. I live there sometimes. I hang around while people are watching the evening news, and literally half of the evening news in European nations is about Trump. For 5 solid years, we have heard nothing but attention to Trump. The New York Times might as well be called the New York Trump. CNN might be called whatever they are, the comedic Trump News Network, and so on and so forth. And so the left, who doesn't have any particular dislike for the human being, Donald J. Trump, the fact of the matter is, if you look at the photographic history of his life, he was absolutely beloved by the left. He has every leftist under the sun is seen hugging him and kissing him, and from Jesse Jackson to Bill and Hillary Clinton and so forth. So the particular individual, Donald J. Trump, is not hated by the left. And yet, from the moment he defeated the Republican slate of candidates, absolutely every single solitary second of our lives was dominated by the mention of and attention to President Trump. Not President Trump, Mr. Trump, Donald J. Trump. This is something that I would like the MAGA community to be alert and to be aware of, is because the left can't understand the commitments of constitutional conservatives, moral conservatives, people who like church, who like family, who like gender, who believe that America is progressing well in the age-old and always need to be improved race relations, etc. There's a community of people who are generally proud of this country, proud of its founders, proud of the people who've lived and died to make this country good, and we keep trying our best to do so. They're called Trump supporters. Yes, we were Trump supporters, or are Trump supporters. We're very grateful that a man had the courage and the fortitude and the sheer stamina to withstand an assault of this magnitude and fight for the rights or the concerns and rights of American citizens and people and patriots. So one of the things I'm doing here in this particular podcast is asking us now on January 20th not to have an identity that does not fail to remain in profound gratitude for the sacrifice and efforts of President Trump and his family, but at the same time not be pigeonholed by the left, which absolutely despises everything about him and has spent thousands upon thousands of hours from the moment he announced politically in efforts to destroy him. We have lived through a singular international and especially domestic effort to destroy a single human being, the likes of which we've never seen. And so once this narrative begins to gain footing, then something called a Trump supporter is synonymous with someone who can't see what's in front of your nose, can't see what the plain light of day, that this is a bad human being. Surely you should understand that. We've said so literally millions of times, that this is a bad human being, and you're a supporter of a bad human being. So one of the things I'm trying to do here with this podcast is introduce or mention that this community, yes, we are Trump supporters. We're grateful that a leader has come along who's identified the pillars of American virtue and American idealism and the dreams for which we work hard and sacrifice. And of course, therefore, we would be supporters of an individual committed to and sacrificing himself and sacrificing his family for the pursuit of these goals. But we are not kind of, Katie Couric even described Trump supporters as cult members, as needing to be programmed. This is a typical on the part of anybody who can't understand the nature of commitment to particular ideals and gratitude and support for individuals who help fight for those ideals. And so I'm trying to come up with a term, and I'm calling it the MAGA community. Anyone can write in or take up or do what you like or come up with a better name. The MAGA community are people who are 75 million plus. It's 75 million plus who have recognized in the efforts of President Trump the effort to regain for Americans and for American life the God-given rights and pride in the efforts we've made to date to have this nation be a leading light and a leading hope for people in the world. The purpose of this podcast was to go through 4 points of attention which I believe are vital for the MAGA community, for the 75 million plus, to begin to immediately orient ourselves towards. But I've spent so much time speaking about the nature of the person of President Trump as he leaves office, the nature of the community who have supported him and gratefully, and to come up with some definition that whereby this community can continue this effort with honor and with dignity. So instead of going to those 4 points, I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to create a part 2 for the January 20th podcast. Thanks for listening thus far.